Go and throttle up.
Discovery Roger, go for deploy.
Thanks to you and to everybody in the shuttle program. The crew is go for launch.
Roger, nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
Spacecraft as we await its departure from the International Space Station. We expect Dragon Endeavour to push away from the space station with the Crew-2 astronauts on board just after 11:05 a.m. Pacific time, making their way back to planet Earth. My name is Kate Tice, and I'm a senior certification engineer here at SpaceX. I'm very excited to bring you live coverage of Crew Dragon completing its second long-duration mission with people on board as part of our Crew-2 mission for NASA. Joining me today with NASA Communications, Gary Jordan.
Hey, Kate, it's great to be here for the third crew return in NASA's Commercial Crew Program, the second as part of a crew rotation mission. At this moment, NASA astronauts Shane Kimbrough and Megan McArthur, JAXA astronaut Akihiko Hoshide, and ESA astronaut Thomas Pesquet are making their final preparations to load into Dragon and prepare to come home. Once Dragon departs the station, Crew-2's flight home is expected to last a little more than 8 hours, including a fly-around of the International Space Station, 4 departure burns that move the Dragon away from the station, a phasing burn to lower its orbit and line the spacecraft up with the landing location, and 1 final deorbit burn. Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, in the Gulf of Mexico tomorrow, today, later tonight, at 7:33 p.m. Pacific Standard, 10:33 p.m. Eastern Standard, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels, in this case, the Go Navigator.
This mission began 6 months ago on April 23, 2021, from historic Launch Pad 39A at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. After a successful liftoff and separation from Falcon 9, Crew-2 enjoyed a roughly 24-hour flight on board Dragon on their way to the International Space Station. Since arriving, the 4 astronauts supported hundreds of experiments and took part in day-to-day operations during Expeditions 65 and 66. Kimbrough, Pesquet, and Hoshide completed several spacewalks in support of solar array panel upgrades, deploying 2 new arrays and preparing a support bracket for additional arrays.
After 199 days in space, they are entering the final phase of their mission, and in just a few hours from now, they've been preparing for over 2 weeks for this return flight. Today on board the space station is the Expedition 66 crew, now led by Roscosmos cosmonaut Anton Shkaplerov. Also on board is NASA astronaut Mark Vande Hei and Roscosmos cosmonaut Pyotr Dubrov. The weather right now at Pensacola is looking fantastic. That is the prime landing site for today. We just did a go, no-go poll about 15-20 minutes ago, and the teams polled go, so we are ready to undock.
Yeah, it's definitely something we've been keeping our eye on. Now, the ground teams have been performing a number of checkouts. In addition to the weather, keeping our eye on the weather, the ground teams have been performing a number of checkouts and preparation checks on the vehicle, such as heat shield inspections, checking out the suits, seat actuator checkouts, of course, prop checkouts, and of course, cargo load. Crew Dragon is the only vehicle capable of bringing back significant amounts of cargo from the space station, so getting all of that locked and loaded in place. Now let's go over to Shaniqua Vereen at the Johnson Space Center to talk a bit about how the station crew have been preparing to send Crew-2 home and what we can expect from here until Dragon departs station. Shaniqua?
Thanks, Kate and Gary, and welcome inside the International Space Station Flight Control Room. I'm NASA Shaniqua Vereen, and we are currently awaiting Crew-2 to ingress. I did see 2 of them float into the capsule, but we're still waiting on the other 2. They will board Dragon and be on their return flight home. Crew ingress just started around 10:50 a.m. Central Time, 16:50 GMT, or just about a minute ago. We're going to take a look at the major upcoming milestones, not only for today's departure, but for the splashdown later tonight. So, as we said, crew ingress is currently underway. we're waiting for the rest of the crew to board Dragon for the return flight home. 11:15 a.m. Central Time, 17:15 GMT hatch closure. In about 30 minutes from now, we'll be closing Dragon's hatch. Toma and Aki suited up prior to ingressing the Dragon. Once inside the vehicle, after hatch operation, Shane and Megan will don their SpaceX spacesuits, which will be worn during all of the dynamic phases of flight. All the same leak checks on the spacecraft would occur before the crew would make their way into their seats to strap in for undocking. Concurrent with Dragon hatch, APES hatch closure, once Dragon's hatch is closed, Mark Vandehei will affix a docking target to the outside of the APES hatch and then close it, creating a space between Dragon and the station known as the vestibule. He'll then make his way out of the pressurized mating adapter and close the Zenith hatch on Node 2. Around 11:40 a.m. Central Time, 17:40 GMT, we'll have the vestibule depressurization. Once hatches are closed, a ground command will be sent to open valves on Dragon to begin depressurizing the vestibule, essentially venting the air inside and bringing it down close to vacuum. They'll pause at approximately 5 psi for a few minutes to allow temperatures inside the vestibule to stabilize before finishing the depress. Around 12:50 p.m. Central Time, 18:50 GMT, go-no-go for undocking. Teams here in Mission Control Houston and in Hawthorne do a final joint go-no-go poll for undocking. We're looking for undock around 1:05 p.m. Central Time, 19:05 GMT. An undocking command will then be sent, followed by a few minutes for the umbilicals that connects power and data between the two spacecrafts to detach, for 12 hooks holding Dragon in place to retract, and then 2 quick firings of Dragon's thrusters will initiate separation, and undocking will be complete. After undocking and before embarking on the journey home, we are looking for the crew to do what's called a fly-around maneuver. Crew Dragon will make a full loop around the station for about an hour and a half for the crew to photograph the laboratory's exterior. This is a general survey around the station to see areas that can't be regularly seen by external cameras and the robotic arm. NASA astronaut Mark Vandehei will be watching the undocking and the departure from the cupola, but the prime departure monitoring falls on Shane Kimbrough and Megan McArthur. Mission controls in Houston and in Hawthorne will back them up. And as you've heard already several times this morning, their Dragon flight is intended to be autonomous, but the crew on board has the ability to take control and maneuver Dragon during departure if necessary. On the station side, we're still looking good. Solar arrays are locked in place. We have good communication links, and the attitude will remain on U.S. thrusters control until the time of undocking, when we'll switch to use control moment gyros only. We're tracking no issues for an on-time departure. As we enter final ingress, I'll throw it back to Gary and Kate in Hawthorne.
Megan, have you the same? Great. Megan, I'm showing stale data on display 1.
Copy, stale data.
All right, thank you, Shaniqua. And we are hearing some of the communications checks and getting fantastic views on board the International Space Station. Right now, what you're looking at is a camera that's positioned inside the Node 2, that's the forward module, the Harmony module, and it's pointed straight up towards the space-facing side of the International Space Station up to PMA 3, pressurized mating adapter 3, now getting views inside the Dragon. Pilot and commander, that's Shane Kimbrough and Megan McArthur. From this view, Shane Kimbrough on the left, Megan McArthur on the right, already in their suits in position. They are suited up. The mission specialists will be suited up here shortly as they are all getting prepped. We're getting views of Mark Vandehei inside the pressurized mating adapter as well. And again, we did a go-no-go for weather, so we're looking very good at this time. The Dragon ingress operations you can see now are underway. We're about 20 minutes to hatch closure. And then from there, it'll be about 2 hours until Dragon departs the International Space Station, now scheduled for 11:05 a.m. Pacific time. Once inside, they'll have a number of tasks inside the capsule, including getting internal cameras configured and uncovered, activating the Dragon cabin fan and associated air filters, doing any quick cleaning of their touchscreen displays, and if necessary, and then, of course, donning their suits. You can see 2 of them in the suits, and there's 2 more, the mission specialists, to get donned. And they'll be wearing that through the dynamic phases of the trip home. That includes undocking and departure, and then, of course, deorbit burn through splashdown.
There's also a chance for them to go through their final checks on Dragon's control systems before they close the hatch and depart from station. That includes a lot of really small details like checking the lights in the cabin and on their control panels, configuring their seats and their footrests, removing any temporary covers on items like the windows prior to departure, and of course giving the Dragon hatch a thorough inspection, making sure that there's no FOD or foreign object debris there on the hatch seals. We of course want to make sure that the hatch seal is completely sealed, and so going through all of these checks in preparation for departure are super critical. Something that we mentioned before, just like even cleaning off the touch screens. They have been utilizing the touch screens even when they haven't been wearing their gloves, so we might need to wipe those off. But yeah, so we're progressing through those checks now, and everybody's looking on time.
That's right. And even on the station side, Mark Vande Hei is the NASA crew member that will remain on board when we have the Crew-2 astronauts returning home. He'll be one of 3 crew members that remain on board, Mark Vande Hei, and then the, we have another comm check. All right, as they're making their way through those comm checks, we may hear those. Here we go.
With you, Megan, on 2.
I got you loud and clear.
Fantastic. So that's pilot Megan McArthur. When we get the views from the Dragon capsule, you'll see her, that camera being behind the pilot and commander. She'll be on the right side, and she's just doing a series of comm checks. Of course, the mission specialists are still out of their suits. They have to ingress their suits, or don their suits to get ready for undocking just about 2 hours from now. Again, I was talking about the So yeah, they'll be donning their suits, and we'll have some a lot of time while the vestibule in between the Dragon and the space station is pressurizing. Right now they are equalized in pressure and the hatches are open. We're just minutes away, about 15 minutes away from closing that Dragon hatch. From there we'll wrap up our coverage and take a short break while we wait for the vestibule to pressurize in between the station and the Dragon. Will come back up to do undocking. But I was mentioning the crew handover. There is 3 crew members that are going to remain on board. Mark Vande Hei is the NASA astronaut. We have Station Commander Anton Shkaplerov and Pyotr Dubrov, both from Roscosmos, that will remain on board. This is coming from the delay of the Crew-3 launch, which is scheduled just a couple of days from now, no earlier than November 10th. So right now we're in an indirect handover, and this is it's completely fine. It's just all you're missing out on is the opportunity for the crew to just show the new crew, the arriving crew, Crew-3, around the International Space Station, get familiarization on where things are, including the emergency equipment. But we have Mark Vande Hei on board, who is able to do that.
Yeah, and of course weather, especially around Florida, super tricky. So unfortunately, while it would be preferable to do a direct handover, really got to do what's best for both crews. And in this case, that involves returning the crew back home prior to Crew-3 lifting off. So like we mentioned before, weather has been in constant consideration over the last couple of days with constantly changing variables around the coast of Florida, both on the Gulf Coast as well as the Atlantic, watching things like wind speeds as well as wave height. So we're really excited that as of right now, we are going to be bringing everybody home from Crew-2 today. So super exciting.
That's right. And it's going to be an exciting journey. We have, of course, the undocking, and it's about 8.5 hours until they come home. About an hour hour and a half of that is dedicated to something called a fly-around. This is a new capability for Endeavour that was actually, we talked about during the launch. But really what's going to happen is Endeavour is going to undock from the space-facing side of the Harmony module, and it'll back out to waypoint 1, which is about 200, 220 meters away. It'll hold there for about a minute, just make sure everything is lined up.
SpaceX Endeavour on the big loop, Dragon cabin config for departure is complete.
SpaceX copies. Cabin configuration for departure is complete.
Fantastic. Cabin configuration for departure is complete. They are just flying through their procedures. This is fantastic. Once they actually do undock, about 2 hours from now, 11:05 a.m. Pacific, they will back up. Here's a fantastic graphic. Back up to about the keep out sphere, which is about 180 to 220. It's going to keep within that 40 or so meter range, and it'll essentially fly around the International Space Station, going to the from the zenith or the top facing to the aft or the back, and then just make one complete loop from 12 o'clock to 12 o'clock around the International Space Station. The whole time, the Dragon's nose cone will be open, and they have a window at the very front. Well, the crew will be taking pictures right out the window. They'll make a full loop. That'll take about an hour and a half before they do 2 departure burns that will send them outside the keep-out sphere and the approach ellipsoid and begin the journey home. It'll only be a couple of hours there, and we'll provide continuous coverage as they do those departure burns. There's also a departure phase burn that allows them to shift the phasing from essentially co-elliptic with the International Space Station, or pretty much right underneath, to the phasing that allows them to line up with the primary landing zone, and that is, of course, Pensacola, Florida for today. The deorbit burn is going to be a hefty one, a 16.5-minute burn. They'll fire those. Once they do that, they are committed to land in Pensacola, Florida.
Yeah, so super exciting day. Like Gary said, we're going to be bringing live coverage throughout all of it. So it's going to be a long one, but we're excited to bring the crew home today. Like we mentioned before, they have been doing lots of checkouts for their departure, including suit checkouts and checking out the actuators. Oh, there we have a live view inside Crew Dragon. We can see them. You can see, I love this view because you can actually see what they're seeing on their display screens. Yeah. Obviously a map of the world there showing position location, and we can, on the either side is also an indicator showing where the Crew Dragon thrusters will actually be firing from once those are actually happening.
The maneuvers of Dragon itself are pretty much automatic. They're going to be pretty much hands-off, particularly through the fly-around. The fly-around, they do have the ability to do some manual thruster maneuvers, but the manual piloting capability for the fly-around maneuver will not be possible. So it's really up to the Dragon and its computers to make that full loop. And again, it's really just an hour and a half long.
Go for the LIO steps.
And Endeavour SpaceX, we can give you a go for step 3.1. You are go to complete LIO configuration, IMV teardown, and hatch closure per procedure 2.103. And reminder, we are going to be using LIO cartridge 2.
Copy LIO cartridge 2 and all the rest you said. Thanks a bunch.
All right, continuing to configure that Dragon for its departure. For the past 6 months, Dragon has been relying on the ECLIS, or environmental control systems, of the International Space Station. Hatches have pretty much been open, and they have access to it, and they've been able to circulate some air through the pressurized mating adapter. But now that Dragon is departing, it has to rely on its own systems. And of course, the LIO canisters, the lithium hydroxide, those have the very, very important environmental control capability of scrubbing carbon dioxide from the cabin of the Dragon.
Yeah, one thing I want to point out while we have this shot, you can see there in the center where that circle is, so that is the hatch for the nose cone. That's actually the window that they'll be taking photos from. So while that hatch is currently open, we can, looks like we got some waves there. You can actually see the window itself where the crew will be taking photos from during the fly-around procedure, as Gary mentioned before.
There are a couple of positions that they can that the crew themselves can be in. It'll be up to, you can see the window itself is pretty small, and they'll have a handheld DSLR camera to be able to take photos. And it's completely up to their comfort level on what position they decide to be in. They're in space, so they don't really need to worry about up or down. So you can see them in essentially the same orientation that they are in now, just essentially putting their feet towards the where the cargo is and heading out that way. They also have the ability, if they desire, to flip completely upside down and hang their feet on the seats themselves. It might provide a better angle. Who knows? This will be the first fly around for Dragon.
SpaceX for display Alpha.
Go ahead.
Hey Shane, we're going to go ahead and have you cycle the power to display Alpha. We are still investigating potential causes on the ground, but we'd like to start with this step.
Okay, and that's just turning the display off and on the touchscreen. Is that it, or is there something bigger than that?
We're going to actually power cycle it using the display power button in the control panel.
Copy that. Some work.
And we're seeing that procedure happen real time now. A simple power cycle is what you and I do at home. Whenever our laptop is not working, we turn it off and on again. A very simple fix, but they'll analyze to make sure that display is working for them.
For the power cycle.
Yeah, it's cranking back up now. I'll let you know what you see.
On the left, you're getting a view from inside Mission Control Hawthorne. That's the core position, essentially the same as the Capcom position in Mission Control Houston. The voice from Mission Control Hawthorne up to the crew inside Dragon. Behind the displays, you can see Thomas Pesquet, mission specialist. He'll be flanking Shane Kimbrough and McArthur. Him and Akihiko Hoshide, both the mission specialists for the Crew-2 mission.
On display Alpha.
SpaceX copies, still stale data on display Alpha. We are going to continue looking at this on the ground, and I'll have more words for you shortly.
Never copies.
What you're hearing is the communications from the core here in Mission Control Hawthorne up to the Endeavour crew. Just getting Dragon configured. It's going to be about 2 hours from now until they physically separate or undock from the International Space Station's Node 2 Harmony port on the zenith or space-facing side. Getting some views of the Earth now. They'll be able to see a lot of that during their journey. Again, about over the course of 8.5 hours, they'll see a few sunrises and sunsets. So we'll see what happens during the fly-around maneuver, fly-around. Again, we'll take about an hour and a half. We have a lot coming up. We're just about 5 minutes away from the scheduled hatch closure period.
And Endeavour LIO changeout 1709.
Copy, LIO changeout at 1709.
And they're changing out those lithium hydroxide canisters, making sure they have fresh canisters able to scrub carbon dioxide for the journey home. So that will start about 5 minutes from now when they close the hatches. It'll take some time until they actually physically undock from the International Space Station, because there are about 3 hatches that separate the International Space Station crew from the Dragon crew. The first hatch that they'll close, we're seeing it in the background when we got that over-the-shoulder view from inside Dragon, but that was the forward hatch of the Dragon. That is the Dragon hatch. On the other side of that is something called the A-Pass hatch. That's essentially the This is about where Mark Vande Hei is right now. He's pretty much facing it. It's the hatch on the station side in between, which is called the vestibule. That's the part that'll be depressurized down to vacuum before they actually physically separate. Mark Vande Hei's important job right now.
Putting hatch closure in work.
There you go. Hatch closure is just moments away.
SpaceX copies. Hatch closure in work.
Love to hear that.
And again, that'll be the first hatch, Dragon hatch. Once that's closed, we'll wrap up our coverage and allow the crew some time to close the remaining hatches. The A-Pass being another station hatch that creates the vestibule that would be depressurized. The part that you see Mark Vande Hei in right now, that won't be depressurized. That's the pressurized mating adapter. But on towards the screen a little bit is the Node 2 hatch, Node 2 Zenith or space-facing hatch. That's the third hatch. That'll be closed. From there, Mark Vande Hei will move over to the cupola, and it'll be his job to monitor Dragon's departure as well as the fly-around maneuver, and he'll remain in that position until they exit the approach ellipsoid. There's two imaginary circles around the International Space Station. One of them is the keep-out sphere. That's about what they'll hover for the fly-around maneuver, about 180 to 220 meters, or roughly that 40-meter stretch, and just really circle around the International Space Station. And then about a kilometer away.
Closed, PPRV ISO valve is open.
Awesome.
SpaceX copies. Hatch closed, and PPRV ISO valve is in the expected position.
All right, so good news there, hearing that the hatch has been closed. On your screen now, a live view of Dragon. The first time we're seeing it this morning. The Crew-2 crew there is on station. They're now inside Dragon. Crew Dragon that you see on your screen there, that is Dragon Endeavour, as you hear them call out during these communications back and forth from station to ground. So super exciting milestone we've been waiting for the last few minutes.
Very exciting. So now that Dragon's hatch is closed, Shane Kimbrough and Megan McArthur will finish configuring the Dragon cabin. And of course, they already have their suits donned. Akihiko Hoshide and Thomas Pesquet will put on their suits and get in their seats ready for undocking 2 hours from now.
Yeah, no, I love these suits. The suit's primary function is to protect the crew in the event of a cabin depressurization. If that were to occur, the suit would inflate to provide a habitable environment long enough for the crew to return home.
MS1 and MS2 are getting their suits on.
All right, so call out there that Aki and Thomas
SpaceX copies. MS1, MS2 getting suited.
Are both suiting up. The flame-resistant materials on the outer layer of the suit would also protect the crew in the unlikely event of a fire.
So again, the first hatch is closed, the Dragon hatch. In a few minutes, the A-Pass hatch on the station side will be closed. A-Pass is an acronym that stands for Androgynous Peripheral Attachment System, so you can see why we use the acronym. It's an integral part of the docking system. But before closing it, Vande Hei, again, you saw him attaching a docking target that'll be used to fine-tune the alignment for an approaching spacecraft, not something required for undock, but would obviously need to be there for the next spacecraft docking to this port, which in this case will be CRS-24, the SpaceX cargo craft.
Now, once both the Dragon and A-Pass hatches have been closed, depressurization of the vestibule will begin. The vestibule, as Gary mentioned before, is the area between Dragon and the station's docking port that will be exposed to the vacuum of space following undocking. It's been filled with air that originally came from the station's atmosphere and will be brought down to vacuum for undocking. If this wasn't done, breaking the seal between Dragon and the station would result in a fairly propulsive burst of air.
So again, we have the A-Pass hatch close coming up, and then while we're off air, the vestibule will depressurize. That's at about 9:40 a.m. Pacific. It'll take some time once they actually bring it down to vacuum. They pause at about 5 psi to do a leak check. That's expected about 10:40 a.m. Pacific, and then of course they'll configure the Dragon for both fly around and for undocking. We'll be back to provide some coverage right before they do the final go, no-go for undocking, and then the undocking sequence starts at about 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific. It takes about 5 minutes once that sequence starts to undo the hooks, and then there's a couple burns that'll happen. to actually physically separate.
For awareness, we are going to clear the inactive onboard alert from the display alpha power cycle.
Okay, thank you.
All right, they're continuing to work that display, making sure it's ready to undock 2 hours from now. Again, that physical separation is 11:05 a.m. Pacific. Looks like Mark Vandehei is taking some photos. There is that window, the same window that the crew will use to take photos of the International Space Station during the fly around, sending some final photos and final goodbyes to the crew there.
It is a pretty small window that they have to look out, as we saw earlier while the crew was ingressing. So I'm sure that the waves through the window are these little mini waves. But like we said before, pilot Megan McArthur and Commander Shane Kimbrough are both suited up and in their seats. Mission specialists Akihiko Hoshide and Thomas Pesquet are now donning their suits as well, or putting their suits on, and they will be preparing to get in their seats and buckle up. After that, of course, prior to departure, there's going to be some suit leak checks, and that's when we basically pressurize the suits to make sure that all of the zippers and all the fasteners are in place so that the suit can hold pressure, which is, like we said before, in the unlikely event of an emergency, the suit would act like a mini environment to keep the crew safe.
Very important during the dynamic phases of the flight, and that includes the undocking. But again, the Dragon hatch is closed. So now that Dragon hatch is closed, the crew is preparing to depart, and we're going to take a short break before we get ready for undocking to allow all of that vestibule depressurization, all the hatches to be closed, and we'll come back. Our live coverage will pick back up at 10:45 a.m. Pacific, about 15 minutes before the undock command is sent to the Dragon and it gets ready to physically separate from the station.
Yeah. Once we undock, we will stay live with you the entire time until Dragon splashes down off the coast of Florida later today, which is on target for today, Monday, November 8th at 7:33 p.m. Pacific, or 3:33 GMT. So don't go anywhere. We'll see you soon as Crew-2 gets ready to leave the International Space Station.